So what we do in terms of geopolitics is that we question the relationships between flows of data, which is topology, which Loqman defined, and geography, especially in a geopolitical way. So in this regard, we use the methodology of the French Institute of Geopolitics, and basically it is the study of power struggles on territories. And of course, the notion of territory, especially non-state territories, is in the study of data transit is problematic in geography. And in geopolitics, it questions the relationship between classical power rivalries and how the network operates. So our initial questions were those: how does the geopolitical context can influence the network path, and conversely, can we get a better grasp on the geopolitical context by looking at the AS level graph? So we apply those questions to the Middle East at different scales by looking first at the regional connectivity landscape. So we have many ways to describe the AS graph of the Middle East that we see here with data from late 2018. We can see the nodes here are autonomous systems whose colors depend on the countries they are registered in, and their size depends on the betweenness centrality, which is a metric we computed for this graph and which can be compared to the importance of the node in the graph. In geopolitics, we focus on specific aspects. At a basic level, we can see that there is a wide variety of number of autonomous systems by country. Then that the algorithm creates, as Loqman showed, clusters of national autonomous systems. What is striking here is the disparity between the network and the geography. For instance, we see that the core of the network in the middle are European and US operators. US autonomous systems especially are central here. And we can see also geographical and geopolitical anomalies, such as Afghanistan being here between Lebanon, Iran, and the rest of the graph. Regional powers being outside of the graph, like Iran and Turkey. Kuwait and United Arab Emirates also being kind of a part of the graph. And we can also see specific oddities, like at the top, Israel connecting like a set of 50 African autonomous systems. So we want to understand this disparity and the geopolitics that underlie it. So we take 4 regional cases that we further explore. Lebanon, which is a far and disconnected cluster in the region. We take Saudi Arabia as a regional power, which is kind also of separated from the regional network. Iran as a national cluster with few entry points, and Kurdistan in the middle as a particular case of cluster within the network. And to explain these cases, we look at different types of different layers of the internet to study geopolitical issues at different scales: world region, state, and subnational region. So if we first look at the cable layout in the region, which is a map provided by the ITU, we can see that it provides some information, of course, first on geomorphology, because we can see that desertic areas are less likely to host cables or IXPs, but also in the geopolitical context, because we can see here the lack of connectivity possibilities between, for instance, Lebanon with its terrestrial neighbors. But the infrastructure, as Loqman said, merely implies that autonomous systems can be connected through BGP, but it doesn't really inform us of existing BGP relationships. So we look at other information. Here we use both RIPE Atlas and RIPE BGP dumps to try and find how routing and geopolitics intertwine. So at a regional level, we take the example of Lebanon. This is a map of round trip times towards a website in Beirut from Atlas Pro within the region. And it both confirms the map cable, and it provides also more information on the topology, because not only is Beirut disconnected from its neighbors, we can also see that despite direct connections to Cyprus and Greece, it is much more directly connected to Bulgaria and therefore Europe. And this disparity brings into question, of course, the strategy chosen by Lebanese and neighboring operators. Again, at the regional and, in a way, world level, we try differently to visualize and map the topology. So here we use the anamorphic cartogram, which is designed initially to distort and reshape spatial entities relatively to specific data. Here the countries are reshaped according to the number of autonomous systems they have connected to Saudi Arabia. The color indicates the share of national ASs in the totality of autonomous systems connected to Saudi Arabia. So basically, the bigger and the darker the country is, the better it is connected to Saudi Arabia. And here the topology is also visible in a geographical way as either isolation or far-reaching, because you see that Saudi Arabia has a very strong rate of connections towards itself, more than 70%, so it is a relatively closed network. But it is also strongly connected to Italy and Western Europe as a whole, and in a way the United States as well. And it does not match neither the geography nor the possibilities given by infrastructure. So it brings into question the role of Saudi Arabia in the region, in the network. At national levels, we use different metrics to try and understand how the topology works in geography. So the Iranian topological landscape has an interesting shape, which has evolved in the last decade towards more control, because countries like China, for instance, have developed their network specifically to be able to create their now infamous Great Chinese Firewall. But Iran, much like Russia in a way, is trying to enhance progressively the control over its network. So the notions of complexity and points of control, which were developed by researchers at Harvard, can help us understand this. Points of control are the number of autonomous systems necessary basically to connect most of a country to the internet. So Iran is not the most centralized system here. It is behind Iraq, Syria, Bahrain or Afghanistan, but it's still kind of high in the region. And complexity refers to how much it is difficult to control the country's connections to the global network. And so the less the figures, the easier it is. And between 2011 and 2017, most country complexity in the regions have fallen, meaning that governments can much more easily control the external points of their network. But Iran is kind of specific because this policy is well known, and it is shown quite clearly on here because we can see that there are three main entry points that are affiliated to the governments and which serves as bottlenecks for the whole country to be connected to the internet. So right data sets help us also understand the political choices made by governments regarding the internet and the policies applied. And as a final case study, we took Kurdistan in Iraq at the level of a sub-national region. The case of Kurdistan as a topological territory, which is an oxymoron in geography, is quite insightful, and it echoes similar situations in other conflictual regions. In 2013, there were tensions between Baghdad and the Kurds, and this brought about a change in the regional connectivity. Kurdistan was now connecting to the internet via Iranian ASs in order to relieve themselves from dependence of the Iraqi government. So Al-Sad and IQ Network here being major Kurdish ASs connected to the internet via Iran. And in 2018, as was shown on the graph, some of the Kurdish autonomous systems were connected to Iraq directly, but two specific autonomous systems were instead integrated to the global internet only via American and European autonomous systems. So, as a conclusion, routing and politics are deeply tied, and we need to create satisfying representations to take into account these entanglements. In fact, we find that geography, geopolitics, and cartography help us better understand the functioning of the internet. And the internet has often been seen as an ether distinct from geography, from people, and from infrastructure sometimes, but quite the opposite, it is subject to political issues at each and every political scale. So the data we find can lead to visualizations, maps, and geopolitical analysis that constitute efficient tools to better understand how the internet is shaped, operated, and working as a whole.
As well as technician, there is the need for multidisciplinary research, and also take into account the fact that when it comes to routing, when it comes to creating infrastructure, you need to have a geographical and geopolitical understanding, which is something that is usually not really taken in account. And it also means constructing a new and leveraging new methodology to represent this interaction between the topological level of internet and the geographical level. And this is a work we all have to do in order to have to get a better understanding of what internet really is. And finally, it also brings us to the need for better data sets, especially geographical data set, in order to be able to really understand the interaction and how intricate they can get. Because as we have seen with the Kurdistan example, just having a geographical data set which is country-based is not sufficient, and sometimes we need to go even further into the details. I guess that finishes our presentation. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.